Hello, everybody, and welcome to Episode 4 of the Jankyard, the self-proclaimed best podcast for Ashes Reborn, an extendable card game by Plaid Hat Games. We're here to talk about all things Ashes, news, events, the meta, and in particular, what we like to call open-minded deck building. And who are we? Well, you love to hear his sexy voice dripping with excitement, provided he can actually get his audio setup working. It's Schmendrix.
My audio setup is never working, and that's the secret.
There you go. Then there's the only one among us with a smidgen of success and credibility. It's Killer Cactus.
I don't know how much success and credibility really come with my package here, but I'm happy to accept that compliment.
Well, you just made the top cut again, so there you go.
Yay, I did.
Yeah, by beating me. So, that's a sore subject for today.
It was unfortunate matchup, honestly.
Yeah. And of course... Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You introduce yourself, please.
Well, might as well, right? And of course, myself, a prime example of the Dunning-Kruger effect treatment.
Woohoo, the treatment.
Thanks.
Should we clap for the treatment? That's our thing today.
I think we should clap.
Oh, gosh.
Great job.
No, stop. don't do any clap. All right. Yeah, so we can touch on the match. So Shuffle Bus Last Chance Pod Qualifier is ongoing right now. And, Killer, it was me, you, and Lambda in our pod. Mm-hmm. And you took it 2-0. So congrats.
Yes, thank you. Very interesting pod.
It was a lot of burn.
Yeah, I did run a lot of burn. It's three really interesting decks in our pod. Stuff that, Phoenixborn doing stuff that you don't see those Phoenixborn typically do.
Yeah, you were running Remia.
Yeah, I was. Remia with, all the burn that there is. And Lambda had a Rowan deck. I mean, Rowan does like to do kind of control, but he was doing, melee type stuff, like spin down.
Yeah, his was interesting, with Knights on Cricket there, too.
Yeah, and then you have Leo running Fallen, which is... was cool and effective. Just, Leo's not normally like a fallen dude. But I thought it was cool that we had three decks that were, kind of have Phoenixborn that are known for doing something, and none of them were doing that thing.
Yeah, my deck, I've posted it before. It's also published. It's the Birds and the Zombies deck. And it's got Abundance, Fallen, and Doves. And normally I start all three of those plus Rising Horde and whatever, but I knew that you had Ancestral and Ceresaurus, so I was like, well, I can't deal with taking 8 damage to the face round 1, so I figured I'd go the Open Memories route instead and just forego Abundance because I wasn't expecting a long game. And I didn't necessarily want to give you that much more draw into your burn plan.
Yeah. Abundance is a tough play against Remia because she can, visions first too and set up so she knows what she's going to get and has a little bit of control over that when Abundance is on the field. So it's always tough to play that into her.
I mean, I can also, before I Abundance, I can do my own self-sack shenanigans on the Finch or Doves and mill that away, which is what I used against my match with Lambda to much success. It came down to just fatiguing him out. You had 5 cards left in deck, and 2 of the Molten Golds. No, one of them was milled away. Both Final Cries were milled away, and then you drew into the last 2.
Yeah, I'd drawn into Molten Golds, one in round 2, and then another. Actually, maybe both in round 2, or one in round 3. But I'd found them with visions, right, and set them up so that I would meditate stuff that wasn't Molten Gold and then draw those. Or I think at one point I looked and I had Molten Gold and 2 Nature's Wrath or something in there, and I threw I threw 2 Nature's Wrath on top and then Molten Gold underneath, and then attacked the Glowfinch. So the Glowfinch died, milled off the 2 Nature's Wraths, which I didn't care about, and then had the Molten Gold sitting there to draw. And that was the kind of stuff where Remia isn't really, again, she's not really seen as a burn deck, but I love visions in combination with burn spells because you can find them, right? Like you hear a lot of talk about burn decks love to draw cards because they draw into those burn spells, and it's kind of the same thing, right? Where Remia's digging them out and more actively when I have Chant of Worship on the board. But in our game, I thought, I was afraid of getting milled, so I didn't want to. I wanted to speed the game up as much as I could, so I went double Revenge instead of Revenge and Worship. But that's really cool, and this is a deck I've posted online also. My Remia burn list, which was inspired by Alfred's Remia Chant of Worship Ritualist Sarasaurus deck that I saw last week, and thought was just the idea is just so cool to me because Remia. I always say Remia is a really good Phoenixborn for building with like the utility ready spells, the stuff that doesn't bring out guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Because her battlefield's little, she has a large spell board to put those down, and she can just play Ancestral Army and take up 3/4 of her battlefield. So you don't need a bunch of summon books, and that gives you room to put other stuff on the spell board. And ever since Ritualist came out, I feel like the whole kind of community has been like, well, it's a cool card, but I don't know where I can make the chance work without giving up a lot of tempo. And when I saw him do that with Ritualist and the chance in Remia, I was like, well, is this just it? Right? Like I say that all the time, that Remia is the place to put these utility spells. Why didn't I think of this?
Well, not just that, but you also have the mounting, right? So you're
Yeah.
making double use of the Ritualist, possibly getting it back if they actually kill off the mount.
Right, which is, again, what he was doing. And I just thought that was so cool. It's like we can get Chant of Revenge, triple Chant of Revenge on the board really fast. He was doing it with Chant of Worship, but I played him, right? And then I kind of said, I love this thought. I think it'd be really cool with a burn deck. And we talked about it for a little bit. And then I threw that together. And I've always loved Sarasaurus in burn decks anyway. Just because it's a good burn card. Right? Like it
Yeah, I think you got like a good 4 to 6 out of that.
Yeah, just from overkill. Right? Like swinging, like when you swing Sarasaurus, unless you're swinging it at something really big, it's doing a damage to the Phoenixborn one way or another. And when you put a Fire Archer underneath it, you get a damage on the Phoenixborn when you play Fire Archer. Then you mount it, you swing, you get another damage, and then if it dies, you get the Fire Archer back and get another damage. Like it's a really efficient burn engine.
And it's another card that I think the other knock against Sarasaur is it's not super dice efficient, but it's another card that with the efficiency that Remea has to put bodies on the battlefield, you can afford to overpay a little bit on. And given that burn decks are desperate for battlefield control, I think the fact that it provides battlefield control with burn from overkill added on top makes it a really nice complement.
Yeah, for sure. I've always liked it in those decks. I think one of my first Shuffle Bus successful decks was a Leo burn that did Fire Archer and Sarasaurus and other burn cards. It had a lot of the same kind of stuff as this actually without the chance. And Anguish and stuff in place of it. But yeah, and I've had so much fun with this deck since I built it and played it. I've played a bunch of games. It's done really well. Had a ton of fun, and this last chance pod qualifier came out, and I just said, well, this is the deck that's really fun and I'm doing well with right now. I'm just gonna keep running it, and it's cool. So thanks, Alfred. Good inspiration.
I'm excited to see now that I don't know if that qualifier is done yet, and congratulations. And I got to see the match, or most of it. I think I started in round 2. And I agree with Killer. That's a really tough matchup for a Leo mill deck.
Especially Fallen.
Yeah.
You can just throw burn over top of the Fallen, right?
Yeah, I don't think the problem was that it was Leo, because I got you down to 5 cards, and I could have gone more aggressive. It was just the fact that Fallen, I'm not going to output that damage compared to burn.
I'm very high on aggro Leo at the moment. I think I hope someone runs an aggro Leo deck in the championship, because I think he's slept on. I mean, 6 battlefield plus effectively 4 spell board with the Finch, I think is a really strong stat line, and Anguish is a fantastic card to close games. I hope someone runs
and a lot of health.
Yeah, and 19
right?
health. Yeah.
He's a good. I have a burn deck, and I debated running that version of it, um, which maybe probably would have been better. It would have been more of a race to just like it's got the full sort of burn package, and that could have been interesting. But oh well. Next 2023
It's our year, man. Treatment. We're gonna get there.
someday. Yeah. I mean, we did well ish in the teams. Like the other thing that was going on that just wrapped up was
Well-ish.
the Slam Jam.
Well, a huge shout out to Redentor, Clue, and Vincent. What's his handle?
No, V Jackson Brian.
V Jackson.
Brian V. Jackson.
Yeah, I know his name's Brian. I couldn't remember. I don't know. Brain farted on his handle on Discord, but they had an awesome showing and they took it home. And Clue and V Jackson, all three of them, really creative deck builders. I think it's interesting. We talked about the psychological outs we provide ourselves in playing Jank to lose, and chatting with them on Discord. I think they felt the team event, I think, created a lot of pressure in a positive way for them to actually bring their A games, and I think they ran some things that as more open-minded deck builders, and they're not used to playing. I think V Jackson had a Brennan deck that he was running in the final, effectively the finals, to try and seal it. So, but they
I mean,
pulled it out.
they had a clean sweep, right?
Yeah, goes to show you how if you spend a bunch of your time, if you're serious about the game and you study the lines and you're excited about it and you're passionate about it, I don't think you give a ton up playing Jank in terms of your ability to then play meta decks. Like obviously studying the meta lines is going to be rewarding in and of itself, but they're very good players who just happen to like playing off meta stuff a lot of the time.
Well, since the last episode, which was you guys had just finished both winning, and um, I was going up against, was it Cam at that point, and just got whooped by his Mayoni. He pulled a he pulled a Hammer Knight with Root Armor round one, and I thought I had it all good. I was playing Tristan, cleaned up the snake. It was, had a fester. Everything was going well. And then eventually he drops down an explosive growth on the Hammer Knight. And then he does exhortation, I think round 2 or round 3, and hit me for 25 or something like that. It was rough.
Yeah. Explosive growth is totally balanced. Totally balanced.
Yeah. Totally balanced, as we were discussing today. It got hot. It got hot in the Discord today. It was fun.
It was.
I liked seeing everyone actually, discussing something, because the rest of the week was a little quiet. And then I played Carl, which a little bit of a foregone conclusion. He played his Tristan that time, and I played the Leo Strange copy, and just smashed again. So at least you guys brought it home. I think we did what, 2nd or 3rd place?
I don't think so. I don't.
No,
I lost.
Yeah, we went
Oh,
one.
you lost?
Yeah.
We went 1 and 2 in the.
Oh, I thought you guys
thing.
pulled it through. Oh, so geez, bunch of losers.
You want to hear about my loss? It was brutal. Little Lizard. I
Oh yeah, her echo.
Yeah,
Right?
I took a game off her in the pod, and I think she was out for revenge. She took it personally and just stomped me with an echo. I think I had a shot. I was playing an Odette, so I went back and looked at the very first deck I ever built. Actually, a revision of the very first deck I ever built for AIL in 2020, and that was an Astria with like Lightbringer and Mirror Spirit, all the stuff I still like messing around with, but like also I think it had Augury, like it had some really bad ideas in it. Plus it's an Estrella, which you're already at a handicap. So I updated it. I put it in Odette. I added Tidal Shifts and Tidal Crab, and so the spell board was Lightbringer, Tidal Crab, Mirror Spirit, and first 5 often included Tidal Shift and sort of Virtue, providing a little bit of a pivot so that I could play double Lightbringer potentially and not choose to play Mirror Spirit. And I did not first five correctly. I really needed to first five Sword of Virtue to get a big removal on a knight, and I didn't. And I handled the knight, but it basically cost me the round. And I think round two was really where things fell apart. I don't. Oh, I know what happened. I tried to enter the fray against a false demon, and I had two enter the phrase whiff, one on a particle shield, so it didn't remove the unit, and a second on a fate reflection, which it didn't get full value.
Oh,
It didn't kill something with two health on my board, but it still feels bad, man. Feels bad to take damage and have your sword bounce
yeah.
back in the face of a unit
Get nothing.
on your side. So it was. Charlotte was watching, ironically, when that hype particle shield play landed, and she disconnected for like 30 seconds when the most devastating particle shield of my Ashes career smacked me in the face. So Charlotte missed it, but and she actually came back on to say, "I can't believe I missed that particle shield." In any case, it was rough. But what I will say is, I think Lightbringer plus Title Shift is legit, and need to find a way of like the amount of control you can get from those two cards by themselves basically is quite substantial.
Yeah, I built. So we play. I played that deck right against
I
you.
think you
You were
did,
testing,
yeah,
I
yeah.
guess. And that was I was testing the Leo deck, and well, we'll agree that technically you won, because I goofed and selected the wrong card at the end and milled myself. Um, but
Killed
but it
by
was a
your own
close match.
abundance, hoisted on your own
Yeah, I just wanted to
petard.
play the
The
dove. It was the dove first wins me the game. Anyway,
abundant seppuku.
little lizard, or little Lizzie. I've only played her once. What was it, like in the summer? Ashcon 2 maybe, and she just brought an Echo deck that was like go ham, like Realm Walker,
Yeah, that's
Sonic,
like her MO.
Chaos Gravity, another refresh, or whatever. It was wild. I think I took 12 or 14 damage in round one, and I was playing Rin with Steadfast, and something. And it was crazy, but I mean, it was all allies, right? So she ran out of steam. I held on to 2 life for like 2 or 3 rounds and managed to win. I think by particle shield play, honestly. So that's my only experience against her. But she's got some wild decks, and she's really cool
Yeah,
too.
Ash's dunking aside, you could not lose to a nicer person. I mean, I know we say that about a lot of people, but she's a great person to play.
Yeah,
And we
Lizzie's
we did
cool.
voice chat while we did it,
Mm.
so she could listen to me slowly, the life drain out of my voice. There was no hype by the end.
You're all friendly, and at the end, it's like, Shmeny, you still there? So yeah.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
moping. Yeah.
Yeah, I got to.
So I mean, sorry, go
No,
ahead.
Yeah,
I
yeah, we
was
got to
gonna
hear
say,
you. Killer was the only one who won. We should revel in his success.
I mean, I played Brian. I played Hope Creepers, and I won because Hope's overpowered. Like, that's it.
Yeah, I watched that game.
It
He played Cole, right?
he did.
Yeah.
And how was your trip to the dark side? Have you recovered? Like, was it
I
was,
don't
was
know. I mean, it
benefits nice over there? Good
it
good
it
spread.
feels like cheating.
Well, this is your take on it, though. This isn't the Brian, last shuffle bus or the tuxedo version. This is a
No,
gates thrown
yeah,
open
it's a little
version.
bit different. I mean that was cool, right? Like I started gates thrown open. I didn't start double down. But I like bluffed double down, right? By having I made sure I had a time die and an illusion die up all the time, and I tried to like hold off my gates as long as possible, so that because I only had one illusion die, so as soon as I play gates, like the cat's out of the bag, right? And I kind of tried to do everything I could to delay the gates as long as I could to make him play scared of double down, which worked. And then furthermore, he even said in the game like the game basically ended in round 3, I think, when he walked into a double down. I had it that time and he slashed me and I doubled down and then swung back for lethal. And he said, like, after you didn't play double down in the first round, I just figured you didn't have it. And that was kind of a cool little, concept, right? Part due to the team nature of the event, where it was actually possible for a Hope Creepers with Illusion in Time not to run double down because maybe somebody else on my team needed double down, which is why I switched to Gates, and so he could then believe I didn't have the double down. So that was interesting, but regardless, like it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, they are pushed. I mean, overall though, like I think this team slam jam thing was a slam dunk.
No
It
doubt, it
was
was
super
great.
fun. It was awesome to see what people came up with, and I know that there's been a lot of sort of like post tournament talk as to what we could do next, and I'm personally excited to see slightly larger teams because I think you could easily do up to 5 people in a team,
That'd be fun.
and still build some really cool decks.
Yeah, and stay tuned for my free agency announcement.
Schmendrix's contract is up. We will not be renewing it. He's a
Yeah.
free
That's
agent.
fine.
I mean, I think they were all like, I mean, my matches were probably the most lopsided, the last 2, but it's too bad I didn't get to see your match. Shmeny might have made me feel better.
Yeah, it was definitely one-sided after round 1, but I think it came down to basically a first 5 error, which is maybe a good segue into how to pick a first 5. And short story, don't do what I did.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can get to that
Okay.
right away,
Okay.
or we can,
You're the host.
we can also talk. Like, was there anything else since we're sort of talking about like there's been 2 tournaments in the last 2 weeks? Any other cool decks that you guys have seen?
I did see quite a few cool ones. I played a lot of Ashes this past week. I was out of town for a work conference, and while I was sitting there listening to people talk and taking in all that good information, I could sit there and play Ashes at the same time and watch games. So I played a lot. I saw a lot of stuff. I was very impressed with Dented Bleeder's Lulu, and I think he played a game against Inquisitor that's on YouTube now, so you can check that out and see this deck in action.
What's Inquisitor's YouTube channel? It's like Professional Dork.
Yeah, Professional Dork, I think.
Yeah.
On YouTube. So check that out. This deck's on there, and Inquisitor's running a Tristan that he's been. He took a break from the game for a while, but he's back and he's still running a Tristan like fish burn deck that he's been kind of testing against a lot of things. But this game was against Dented Bleeder. He has a Lulu, a 3-book Lulu with Fighting Spirit, and backed up with Burn. And I think his books he has Mindfog Owl, Time Hopper, and now I can't think of the other book. It's either Wishing Wing or might be
Amber Root.
It's Ember Root.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think it is Ember Root Lizard. Yeah, it's a nature, time, sympathy,
Extravaganza.
charm deck,
Uh-huh.
and with full burn package, minus the final cry because he doesn't have the ceremonial, but he has Phoenix Barrage to kind of replace that. But what makes this deck really cool is the use of Fighting Spirit in it, along with Mindfog Owl, which is something that seems extremely obvious when you say it like this, but was not to me, and I'd never seen anybody do it before. But I mean, the gist of it is he puts a bunch of dudes out with status tokens on them between Time Hoppers and Spark, and then it charges up Fighting Spirit, and then eventually he swings at you with like a couple bunny rabbits and a Mindfog Owl. But he first side action Fighting Spirits the Mindfog Owl to buff it for like 4, and then comes at you with 2 rabbits and a 6 attack Mindfog Owl that you can't block because it's a Mindfog Owl and you only have 2 blockers up.
Yeah, I played against that today, and it's cool.
And he standstills you if you if you have an extra one.
Yeah. And he can stand still you. But just that, I thought that was a really cool idea. Like that's such a cool way to get fighting spirit into the Phoenixborn.
Agreed.
Yeah, and then there's flash strikes in there too, so like he can hit for 8 to 12 easily. Yeah.
Oh, a ton, yeah, and he is, yeah, and explosive growth. He has Gilder also. I swear he
Oh,
has.
does he?
I swear he has Gilder.
I
Maybe it's Gilder instead of.
I didn't
Ember
see that in
Lizard.
today's.
I don't know. I
Well,
thought
I played him. I played him at lunch, and he had Ember Root, but maybe he's got a like flex switch.
maybe I could have swore he had like a Gilder because like I thought in one of our games he was putting Gilder tokens onto the Mind Fog Owl, and then explosive growth did when he swung, so it had like 4 tokens on it and pumped the attack up. But maybe those were time.
But no,
tokens.
but it is cool.
Yeah,
Like the Mind Fog Owl's fighting spirit, that is a cool like synergy that I don't think many people consider, because like how many people are doing Charm Time, right? Like
Yeah.
Charm Time was Oryx set, and there's Sunshield Sentry in there, but other than that, I mean, I guess I've seen some talk this week about Ash Spirit, and I even created a deck for Meatloaf for a shell anyway to start with, but there's not a lot of that color combo.
No, there's not. And like you think about it with Time Hopper everywhere and Spark putting tokens on stuff, Fighting Spirit gets charged up really quick. And if you get punched once with a Mind Fog Owl for 5 or 6, and you're staring down 3x Molten Gold and 3x Sympathy Pain and 3x Phoenix Barrage, like your life is gone pretty fast. And that's not even considering what else he's doing to you with Ember Root Lizard and Hopper attacks and allies and stuff. So I thought that was a very cool deck. That's not only an open-minded, like interesting idea, but is very strong too.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And he's been doing pretty darn well with it from what I've seen. I don't know if he's. I can't remember if he's in this qualifier or not. If he is, he's probably playing it, and I bet he's doing pretty well.
In general, I feel like Mind Fog gets really pigeonholed in the Foggy Bear, but
Right.
you don't. Yeah, you can just go wider. Mind Fog, if it's just the nth unit on the edge of the board, it's always going to get through. And I think there are other things that I want to try with it. Like I've been trying to think about how to make a Secret Door Mind Fog Owl deck work, so you can just have anything, any one health
Right.
unit walk through and carry a massive growth Mind Fog Owl on its back through a Secret Door. I think that's definitely jankier, but yeah, you just go a little wider. And Lulu's a nice platform for it because of her removal. I still think it would, it's kind of always better in Hope, but
Sounds
Hope
like an
with,
interesting Fighting Spirit, Wishing Wing, Secret Door, Mind Fog Owl deck out there.
yeah,
And I was thinking maybe even since we've been talking about James, put in James, because you get a wide battlefield, and you can sort of make up for the loss of the utility spell in your first 5 and drag up, a Raptor Herder to make it extra wide.
Yeah, you just gotta watch that he only has 3 spell board, so you're gonna get Mind Fog Owl and Secret Door and one other thing.
Well,
but yeah,
I was gonna say like pick Fighting Spirit or Secret Door,
Right.
but yeah,
right.
go ally heavy, play it Demona style. I mean, we should talk about your deck, Horse Cheese.
Should we?
Hear that chaos theory? Horse cheese.
Horse cheese.
Yeah.
sounds delicious.
Yeah, you getting cheese from horses.
You can milk a horse.
Sure, why not, man? It's like in Meet the Parents where he talks about milking his cat. You can milk the horse too. What the heck?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, when I put this on the, on like a thing to talk about today, I wasn't anticipating spending like 3 hours in the afternoon on Discord talking about it, but I certainly can, and I played a lot of it while I was on conference as well. I was kind of like hardcore testing it out there, and it took many different forms, but I've kind of settled on one now. And the basics. So if you weren't in the Discord discussion, the base idea of it is the deck does literally nothing except make a Squall Stallion, protect it, and then use its torrent ability to put a million cards back, and it draws a lot. Like the rest of the deck is just cards that draw cards, right? So I'm running abundance and expand energy and generosity and new ideas sometimes and swift messengers and all kinds of stuff that draws cards. So I'm just gonna draw a bunch of cards. I'm gonna torrent them back. I'm gonna protect my horse, and at the top of round 2, I'm gonna play Accelerate, Explosive Growth, Hypnotize, and swing for 20 damage. And that's all the deck does. And I thought it through, and I've come up with a way to really like very consistently get that combo using James, to where I can fit the Hypnotize in my first 5, and I can meditate off a bunch of cards in round 1 until I spin an Explosive Growth, and then use James's ability to pick up a Polarity Mage to get the second part of the combo into my hand. And then all that's left to do is either draw into one of my 3 Accelerates sometime during the first round, or I can just first 5 it and then try to draw into the other like protection stuff, right? Like I can first 5 it instead of a Golden Veil and then try and draw a Golden Veil. Right? That's the idea.
Does it work well against like a ton of removal? Like, have you played it into Odette or whatever?
If the opponent starts 2 hard removal spells, it loses. Right? Like if you start Sword of Virtue and Fade Away, it's gonna lose. Unless I draw a second Golden Veil, which is possible but unlikely. Right? So like I can stop Sword of Virtue with Golden Veil, but if you have that and Fade Away, or something that doesn't rely on damage, because I'm gonna Root Armor it,
right,
then it's gonna or maybe a 2 Shadows or something, and you can come up with a way to exhaust it, then it's gonna be dead. I mean, that was true of the Shining Hydra deck too. I mean, if you that they chained to keep that combo out of the game. Whenever you have a
well, it's the like big huge unit,
yeah, whenever you have
punch
that
type of thing. There's a bunch of variations, but yeah, yours is neat, especially that it's in James. Like the idea of using James and Polarity Mage to get the combo piece. I think that's like, to me, that's the interesting part, because Stallion Hypnotize, or any sort of bypass, could be done anywhere. But the fact that you reliably get your combo pieces because of James is kind of interesting.
And that took me a while to figure out. Like I started it in Rimia, and I was like wasting a bunch of side actions trying to use visions to find the cards, and then if they weren't there, I was meditating them away and then trying to find them again. Like that's how this started. That took way too many side actions, and then I was having to pass main actions, and then
I like those decks because they really built my ego up when I beat them in testing.
Yeah, I went through a lot of iterations of that, like stuff that just didn't work. But it started in Rimia. I moved it to Jericho for a while for the same reason, because she could use Prepare to get one of the pieces.
Right, but that cost you compared to James.
Correct, and that was like my first thing. It's like, okay, I need to get this combo more reliably. How do I do it? Jericho can find a piece. Let's try that. I had to spend a die to do that. I didn't really like it, and then I was like talking to people after games. And Schmendrix was one of those people, and others, and it was like, man, I really need I need a first 6, right? To I need more cards in my first 5 to do this. And then I thought, well, James has a first 6. Like, what can he do it? And then I realized that I could go grab. First of all, I thought I could grab Hypnotize with Essence Druid. That was the first thing I thought of. And then I was like, well, that costs 3 dice. That's a lot. And then I realized that Polarity Mage could get Explosive Growth. And that was it. Right? I was like, well, that's the answer to make it the most consistent it can be. And also, I also run Ocean's Gift in the deck, because, that's not a draw card, but that puts not only to give your Stallion an extra attack, but it's going to put a token on it when it swings, and if I swing it in the first round, it's going to get another one. So that can, give it up, put its attack up by 5 and make it really easy to get it up to lethal damage. And so now I can run 3 polarity
And the dice
mage.
fixing.
Yeah, and it does do that too.
The dice fixing helps, yeah.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it depends on how many cards I meditate to find the explosive growth at the beginning, right? Usually it's a lot of cards, so I don't need a lot of dice fixing, but it still doesn't hurt to have it. And so now I can run 3 polarity mage in the deck, because so I can grab explosive growth or Ocean's Gift. Even if I can't play the Ocean's Gift, I can just torrent it back for another status token.
I'd be interested to see like how that works in Odette, given that you have the extra main actions, but also the removal or the refresh as well with Sword of Virtue. So being able to actually make use of the stallion and keep it alive and punch.
Yeah, it's just like, I mean, I don't know how, you don't have a lot of time, right? Like, it's, if all you're doing is making a really big horse, like, you're not doing a whole lot else. So if they put a few units on the board, like, you take a bunch of damage. Most of the games I've won, I've won like half the games that I've played with the most recent version of the deck. And the ones that I do win, it's like, if I don't win right now, I'm dead the next turn, or like the turn after, or maybe the turn after. Because there's
right, yeah, no, I get that,
and it's like it's hard to spend. Because I thought about that, and I thought about looking at cards that refresh the stallion to swing twice. The problem is you're probably only gonna be able to hypnotize once, is one problem, and then the other problem is like sort of taking that turn is a lot of times I think just too slow. Like it almost has to do it like right at the beginning of round 2, right on the first the first action, and that's it. If you don't do it, then you're just dead.
yeah.
Or if they find a way to kill the horse, you're also just dead. And it is, it's not that hard to kill a Squall Stallion, even without 2 removal spells. You put 6 attack worth of stuff on the board, and you can kill it. I can only Phoenixborn guard 1 time, right? So I don't have any unit guarders or anything in the deck, so it can die fairly easily. But I've been trying to work a Law of Fear into the deck so that I can find a way to first 5 that and still see if I can draw into the combo. And, now have a Stallion protected by Law of Fear, Root Armor, and Golden Veil. And if I can get all 3 of those pieces, it's going to be really hard to kill a Stallion in the first round.
It's very Voltron-esque. But
right,
I'd be interested.
But that's the beauty.
For sure.
Yeah, it's like it only has to live till the beginning of round 2, and that's it. It has to swing 1 time. And it's very easy. So I've drawn that 3-card combo every game that I've played with it, win or lose. I've gotten to the combo piece. The only reason I lose is they find a way to kill the horse. But there's a couple things that beat it. Like Crypt Guardian is a big problem.
Yeah, any exhaustion tech or multiple exhaustion tech, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, kind of, but they have to put 2 exhaustion tokens on it in round 1. Otherwise, it just refreshes in round 2 and kills you then.
There you go. Steady gaze is the meta.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can Golden Veil that, but you got to do it a couple. You got to just like that in a Blood Chains or something, right? Yeah, I'm gonna lose to that, right? But like Crypt Guardian is bad because he's gonna exhaust me going into round 2, and there's nothing I can do about it. So I've slid a couple Adrenaline Rush in there as like a fail safe, and maybe maybe I can get double accelerate into Adrenaline Rush. I mean, that's a pipe dream, but it's kind of the only option there is. But anyway, it was an interesting take. I mean, I built it because I think Explosive Growth is a broken card, and I wanted to see how well a deck like that could prove it, and also kind of wanted to see if like a true combo deck was possible in Ashes, and doesn't really have any right now. And this is the closest I've got, but it's been really like a fun experiment, if nothing else.
I had a point earlier because you were talking about Explosive Growth, and I basically took Schmendrix's Odette idea, and then I took your idea with Explosive Growths, and I merged them into a deck that I put up earlier today, and it worked nicely against Dented Bleeder, but anyway, that's besides the point. I think that there's definitely more interesting synergies that have not yet been fully explored, I guess. And well, I mean, the king of exploring those is Red King, and I guess I don't know which of you sort of mentioned it or wanted to talk about it, but Red King's been playing with some anti-hope tech in Rin. I think I've seen a few of these games where it sort of revolves around String Mage, Small Sack, and then sort of all the utility and protection spells to make it super irritating. I think he's played in Rin and Jessa, at
Yeah,
least whenever I sort of peep games.
I actually have I don't often net deck, but when I do, it's a Red King deck, and I've I played Lament a couple times this past week. Once against Asterix, another time against Lambda, I believe. And it's got 3x body inversion, 3x small sack, and 1 mist spirit. It's called Lament, which I think is basically the experience of playing against it. But your first 5 is some combination of utility spells, the Mist Spirit, String Mage, and Radiant Leviathan. And you basically want to stick a String Mage in the shadow of a whale and then small sack into it. You have Mist Spirits to provide additional attackers, pressure guard, provide blockers. Um, and then it's got 12 allies. So after your round 1, then you're just starting to build up. It's got 2x Battle Seer, 1x Crypt Guardian, 2x Essence Druid, 2x Master Vampire, 2x Sunshield Sentry, and then 2 more String Mages. So
Oh
you're
God.
basically building up this enormous battlefield of knights that no one can like no one packs enough removal for this, especially when you can't really get value attacks if you've gotten your Radiant Leviathan to stick, and you have 3x Golden Veil as well, and 3x Rin's Fury. So you're and 2 Freight Reflection. So basically, you just build an enormous amount of momentum. Now, the thing that deck can struggle with is getting the actually doing enough damage to win, but that's where body inversions really comes in handy because against creepers, super powerful to clear seeds, but against other stuff, you're body inverting your Essence Druid into a 4/2, your Sunshield into a 5/2, your Radiant Leviathan into a 5/3, and even the String Mages are 3/1s. And that is how I've won is those kinds of swings because you do actually get a ton of battlefield control with Small Sack and String Mage.
So that's really cool. So you're saying like how do you lose normally, or how have you seen him lose? Like what is it normally going wide?
I haven't seen him lose, and I have not lost. I only played twice, but
Oh, okay.
I don't think going wide's a huge problem because you, again, of the um, small sacrifice and string mage, and if they do start putting any damage on you, string mage can keep clearing it from the whale and sending it back. I think it struggles to have enough main actions. That's a problem, and that is a big part of why Mist Spirit's important because you need a lot of sides to be manipulating tokens with your string mage. Um, I could imagine though a really wide deck, a committed wide deck would be a challenge for it. If I think a wide wall deck could be quite tough. Um, Lambda's deck, he felt like he misplayed it. It was a wall mill with the what's our new spin down burn spell?
Dream
The
Fracture.
dream,
Dream
yeah,
Fracture.
dream fracture. 3x Dream Fracture. It was a Rowan deck that had 3x Dream Fracture. It had Hollows. It had Enchanted Violinist, I believe. It ran 1x Magic Siphon. Um, and luckily, like I was just happy to mostly. I was not spending like 3 to 5 dice around because they were so pressured by the spin down. And I was still ultimately able to get through on a. I think I body inverted an Admonisher to kill it with a side action and then swung through for
That's
lethal
awesome.
top of round. But um, But it was quite close. I mean, if I hadn't been able to get through that time, I think I was done because I was getting chipped away by Dream Fracture, and he was able to keep a lot of bodies on the table more than I could reliably remove, and he didn't really want to swing very often. So
Lambda's been experimenting a lot in those types of shells with spin down. That's what he played in the team tourney as well, and I think he's close. He's very much got a style which reminds me of like Monk, where he's really iterating on the ideas, and it's just really cool to see. Because the Rowan spin down with siphons and dream fractures was something I've played against 2 or 3 times, and if you have the wrong deck or if you don't have the answers, it is really painful to have to meditate most of your deck away. Like it's tough. But let's move on, because we've got a lot of cool stuff to discuss regarding deck building again. So this is sort of like our part 2, I guess you could say. Last time we covered how do you start deck building, like what's sort of your core concept. What do you do to just look at the cards and say this is what I'm going to build. And this episode we're going to talk about how to first five. So different ways of building your first five. So when you're actually building the deck, things to consider. How many books, utility cards, which we sort of touched on already in certain Phoenixborn, removals, whether you're doing single removal, double removal, none. And then when you actually play, how you sort of pick those first fives. So I guess I'll toss this up to Killer. What's your approach when you're building your first, or like when you're building a deck? How do you sort of envision your first five, or how does that come together?
So I talked a little bit about it last week, but it starts with, for me anyway, it starts with the idea of the deck, right? What is this? What is my idea that, like, what's my inspiration to build this thing? And, that kind of leads me into what is my deck going to do? It's easy for me to use an example. So this Rimia that I've been running in the last chance qualifier, I wanted it to be a burn deck, and my idea was use Ritualist and Sarasaurus Mount because I can put those 2 cards with book taxes on my spell board in round 1 without having to worry about losing tempo to the opponent, and because I have Ancestral Army. That's something I want to make sure we talk about in the first 5 is the tempo to the opponent thing and what that means, and I'll get to that in a second. But I felt like Rimia had a good chance to put down those 2 books specifically, which both have a book tax and both have the same problem of being a card that goes on your spell board that does not create an additional body. And it is difficult to put a bunch of those in your first 5 normally. But because Rimia has Ancestral Army, which is going to put 3 bodies out for 1 card, she kind of has an exception there, which we can, and I wanted to take advantage of that. Right, so when I started building that deck and looking at my first 5s for it, that's where I started, right? I wanted Ritualist in the first 5 to get the chant engine going, so that's kind of always going to be there. I want Sarasaurus Mount the vast majority of the time in my first 5 as well, because it kind of propagates that engine, whether it be by allowing me to reuse a Ritualist or just pushing burn or reuse a Fire Archer or whatever. So that's usually there. From there, I need a way to... I'm going to have Ancestral Army. That's always there, right? Because that's the whole point of why this works, right? So those 3 cards are kind of always in my first 5. And that's where I start, right? What are the cards that I always want to start the game with to make this deck work? And you don't necessarily have to have that. I mean, we talked last week about, players like Asterix and um, Cockamiley and stuff that have made decks that are just a bunch of different first fives, and maybe you don't have anything that always has to be in your opening hand. But I would say the vast majority of decks do, and especially if you're just starting out in building decks, you want to have like a strong plan for where your deck is going to go, and you probably have a few cards, two, probably at least three that are always going to be there. And for me, that was these three, right? Ancestral Army, Ritualist, and Sarasaurus Mound are pretty much always going to be in my opening hand. That costs 7 dice to play those 3 cards. And an 8th die actually to play the chant that I'm gonna pull with the Ritualist. So I've only got 2 dice left, and I said, okay, well, how am I gonna fill out my first 5? And I have a couple of flexes, a lot of 1 die cards in the deck that can kind of fill that spot. Blood Chains is a good one. Final Cry is a good one. More copies of Chance work. I do have I have a Fire Archer that I like to put in there. With the mount, you always want to kind of go ham on allies. Like, I would always suggest at least 2 allies in your first 5 that you can mount, because Ice Trap kills one, and then if you only have one, then your mount's just dead for the round. So I like to have at least 2, and when these allies are only 1 life, I like to sometimes even go 3. I've run into a few games with the deck actually where like people have just spent frog dice and stuff. Like, I'll play a Ritualist and side action to chant, and then someone just frog pings it, right? Because they don't want me to mount it. And it's nice to have a backup. So I usually start the Fire Archer, and then that 5th card can be one of the 2 different chants I have in the deck or any other flex. And I do think it's good to at least leave yourself 1 spot to be flexible in your first 5, just to be able to look at the Phoenixborn that you're sitting down across from. And, the more games you play, the more you kind of understand what the deck is going to look like what they're bringing. I mean, like, I know if I sit down across from Hope and Nature and Sympathy, then I probably have to deal with Creepers for it as an example. But it's nice to have at least 1 spot in your first 5 where you can kind of shift a card in and not disrupt your game plan to deal with a certain issue.
So, like, on that point, and Shmeny, feel free to jump in. Like, do you guys aim for a certain number of units in your first 5, like a number of units that you're trying to get out, whether that be by books or allies, or even recurring them?
It's a really good question. And I'll connect this to a point that Killer made briefly, where he said, thinking about the tempo of the first 5, because I think that's really important. And one thing I like about the Ramea deck and Killer describing it is, I think often the cards that you need in your first 5 are generally books. And what the Ramea deck does is, it doesn't need that. It needs other allies, and that really increases the pace with which the deck can go. And I learned this the hard way in Shuffle Bus few seasons ago, the season where Auric and Lulu came out, where I was one of the many people trying Auric, and played Kaukomiele, and he correctly identified that I basically had no first 5 that really started an ally. I was always running kind of 4 books and, I don't know, something else. And so he just absolutely destroyed me with like a super aggressive Huntmaster open. And that's the challenge. So to connect this to your question about how many units to start, I think it's not just how many units, but also how quickly you're getting bodies on the table. So I had this deck that it's Neo Leo. I played it a couple rounds ago in the pod qualifier, and it did really well for me. And then Aristal, I think it was, ran it in the pod in the Ashcon, and he won his pod with it. And it can pump out an absurd number of units in the first round. So it's got a gates open with Ruin Dweller, Salamander Monk, Seafoam Snapper, um, and it can play gates with those. So that's 8 dice to double up on each of those books, one for gates and um, one for Glowfinch. So that's 7 units. And I actually had this was before Widow's Chain that I played it. I had a first 5. You still have actually a 5th card there. So you've got the 3 books, gates, and you've got a room for a 5th card. So I would flex with either Widows or Excavate if I felt like I needed removal. And if you play the Widows, then you get I think 8 units in round 1. So it's an enormous number of units, but they don't land very quickly. That takes you like 6 main actions to get the first 3 out, and then another 3 main actions to get the next 3. Leo's an okay place to do it because he can get the Glowfinch down immediately if he needs to protect himself. Um, but the other first 5 I had was on the far opposite side of tempo, where it was the 3 books and then 2 knights with either Realm Walker and Master Vampire and Crypt Guardian. So you could get 2 knights down quickly to really try and hold down the battlefield while you play your books. And I think that's really important to think about is, do I have, if my first 5, if my standard first 5 is on the slower side, do I have a first 5 I can flex into that's a lot faster, or maybe goes heavier on removal? And that's the last point I'll make quickly is I've increasingly started thinking about more like net units rather than total units. So I'm trying to think about what is the battlefield advantage I can create between the units I can put down and the removal I can play, either in the first 5 or innately in something like Aradel or Odette, so that I'm not just putting bodies out there in total, but actually thinking about, like, again, how much effectively net battlefield strength I can get when I factor in the removal. So yeah, I think having variety in tempo in your first 5 options is pretty crucially important.
Yeah, the last point is interesting because it's something that I've been thinking about more often now as well. Because I've played super wide decks. Like I think for the previous shuffle bus, like main season in the summer, I played a James deck that could just go. I think it was like 11 or 12 units out in round 1, and that's taking into account Raptor Herder and the Hatchling. So with James, you can get 4 of those. And then Huntmaster, that's 6, and a bunch of other units. Sally, gets you effectively 2 if you can get it killed. And they each have their own problems, right? Same thing with double knights going tall, is you really have to make a judgment call on whether they have the removal, either the direct removal or the AoE, and if they're actually going to first 5 it, and whether it's counterproductive to their own plan, which is part of it's the trick of the game. And I have sometimes a problem misjudging or I guess wrong, and then you can get blown out. But I would say, I don't know if there's like some golden rule. I usually try and get at least, I think, 3 or 4 units. I think that's sort of like my bare minimum on, I've seen people go just 5 book and you can get 5 units and that's fine and you have no removal. And I've seen other people go to, sometimes some beginners go 2 or 3 utility spells or sort of setting up, and they only can get a couple units out or units that can easily be removed, and then you're way behind the ball going into round 2.
Yeah, I think I really get nervous when I'm playing. I think like 5, if I'm playing fewer than 5 bodies, often I start to get anxious. And Odette's a place I can do it. Like this Odette deck I've been playing lately, the one with Title Shift and Lightbringer that I talked about, is one that doesn't. I think it only plays maybe 3 or 4 units round 1. But it's Odette, and she removes 1, and you're title shifting 1 away, and you're often exhausting others with Lightbringer shenanigans. So yeah, you're only getting 3 or 4 units, but you're really limiting options for your opponent. So I think if you're not doing that, playing few units is quite risky.
Well, it's like the typical Aerodel, right? The Zookeeper, where it's really only 4 units in general, like, the Frostback Bear, Gilder, Mindfog Owl, and, I don't remember what the fourth book is, but your net units are higher because you have the Gilder Ping, because you have the Water Blast, and potentially your first fiving something else like an ice trap. So there's a lot of intricacy to it, and I don't think there is a golden rule as a broad building or picking first five, but it comes down more to matchup specific and knowing what, or at least trying to guess what the other Phoenixborn and deck is most likely to pull out. Because I've definitely first five wrong against Red King or Clue in particular, who's I've seen a lot of experimentation with reinforce and just being like, okay, well, isn't that tempo negative? And then next thing you know, they have a ton of units on the board, or some sort of mega defense that you just can't bypass because they're big, beefy units. What do you guys think about? So we sort of talked on tempo spells, and utility. What do you guys have any rules in terms of that? Like, do you ever play utility spells in a 3 spellboard Phoenixborn, or do you only reserve it for 4 and 5?
I mean, I think it all depends on the deck, and that the decks are flexible enough that you can do pretty much whatever you want. I mean, we talked about Horse Cheese that runs 1 unit in the first round, or well, technically 2 if you're going to count my Polarity Mage, right? So I don't need a lot of units there. I've seen 3 spellboard Phoenixborn that run no books, right? Like we were talking about Lizzie's deck, her Echo deck from the summer, where she just pumped 5 allies out in the first round and overwhelmed, right? Like you can do pretty much anything. I don't think there is a hard rule, and if people do think there is one, then I think that I would challenge you to go against the grain and come up with something different. But what I will say, as far as utility cards goes, is I would be very, very careful playing more than one of them in a first round. It's like Schmendrix said before, he gets anxious when there's less than 5 bodies on the board. In a normal, if I'm not playing something like Horse Cheese or whatever, I tend to agree. If we're not putting 4 or 5 bodies out in round 1, then you risk going into round 2 behind, unless you're packing some hard removal. And the way Ashes works on the round system, where everything refreshes at the end of a round, and all your dice come back. When you end that round with significantly less bodies on the board than your opponent, it's really difficult to come back from that, because you're starting with 10 dice and 1 guy, right? And they're starting with 10 dice and 3 guys. They've got a significant advantage over you going into the round. And Ashes does not have a ton of big swingy cards that are going to get you back into that game. You really have to find, a niche where you can blow them out for a couple dice. You can kill their 3 die unit for 1 die or something to get back into it. So that's where that's the problem. If you want to do something like Dream Fracture, Magic Siphon in the first 5, which sounds really cool because it spins down a bunch of dice, then you better have a way to pump out a bunch of other bodies at the same time, right? And that's why I like, I said before, Rimia is usually the place I go look when I want to do a deck like that, because she has a card that can put 3 bodies on the table for just 1 card.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of Phoenixborn that can cheat that 6th card, right? Which I think is where I look for fitting in utility spells. So, Ramia is obviously one because you can pack in 3 units into one card, but even like, Leo as an example, or James, where you do have the built-in unit, which sort of can help cover up for those tempo losses.
Yeah, so I think I think utility spells are fine as long as you still have enough efficiency in the rest of your first 5 to make up for it. Like, you kind of have to know if you're going to start a utility spell that's not a body, you're giving up efficiency by doing that. So your other units have to be extra efficient. Like, you can't, like, Frostback Bear, for instance, is not a very efficient unit in the first round because it has a book tax. Um, so, playing like Magic Siphon alongside Frostback Bear might be difficult unless the rest of your first 5 is really efficient. By contrast, a unit like Ancestral Army is obviously extremely efficient, right? Silver Snake, another Phoenixborn specific unit, super efficient, and you see Mayoni a lot of times starting stuff like Guilt Link or Magic Siphon in the first 5, and she can get away with that because she has a really dice efficient unit in Silver Snake and has a removal spell printed on her Phoenixborn card to kind of even up the battlefield.
Yeah, I mean, part of the efficiency though, because there's 2 different types of efficiency. You're talking about card efficiency as well, specifically when you're talking about Ramia, right? Because there's also dice efficiency if you're considering taxes. And I don't know if this is a common problem. I don't know if you guys experience this, but I've had a common problem where I have sort of my 3 core cards for first 5, and then sometimes I actually struggle. Like, it'll get to, they might be too efficient where it's like 4 or 5 dice. And then I'm like, well, now what the heck do I do with the others? And that's where I start during my deck building process being like, okay, well, if I have 5 dice that I know I'm going to have open, what do I fit in there? And, there's only so many ways of paying 3 dice. It's either a knight or it's doing recursion on something, or maybe using a dice power, and so you're really only playing with 4 other dice plus a power. But do you guys do you experience that at all?
Yeah, I do, and it's part of the reason why it's part of the reason why nature, I think we even talked about this when we in our first series, like those dice powers in nature really smooth out a first 5, and if you want to play a super efficient set of, 3 book, 1 cost units that have a lot of efficiency together, or like Gilder, Sally, Snapper, or something, uh, it's really helpful to have the outlet of a really high value dice power to smooth out the first 5, because it definitely gets a little awkward to both set up a pretty efficient engine in round 1 and spend all your dice to maximum effect in the first round. It's also why I think having a Phoenixborn with a really strong ability that uses dice is handy. You don't have to use it necessarily, but again, it's another option that you have walking into the game to round out 10 dice first 5 that feels quite potent and has flexibility.
Damona's my favorite for that, where I actually like some Phoenixborn I overcost, and Damona's the one that I I probably do that the most with, just because you have the option of mounting something or playing another card, whether it's removal or not. So like if you don't need, your 5th card, or you're playing a couple books and you don't need to summon the book, but you can take the opportunity to mount if they don't remove the ally right away. It's kind of a nice way of like, you still get the setup of what you want to do with your spell board, but then you have the flexibility in which units or what you're using in your remaining few cards.
Gosh, I love first fiving Demona.
Yeah, it's fun.
She's so much fun. Um, my favorite thing to do with her is to have those last 2. So I typically don't overcost with her, but I agree that's a cool strategy to do, and then to give you that option of whether to mount or to play another card. I'll do the other thing where I save 2 dice and I make sure those 2 dice are like a ceremonial die and um something that I can play a 1 cost ally with, and then I'll play that ally down, swing with it, and say, okay, up to you now, other player. Are you going to kill my ally or are you going to let me mount it? If you kill it, I'm going to revive it with ceremonial power and put it back on the board. And that's how I spend my 2 dice. If you don't kill it, then I'm going to make it an Imperium mount. And I don't care which one you do because they're both good.
Right. Yeah. So effectively, it would have to be like 5 dice that you're putting aside, right? Because you're gonna play, like, let's say you do Enchanted Violinist, right? Because you get the ping, they kill it, and then you recur it. You play it again. That's 3 dice, and then 2 dice for the mount.
Well, no, I'm saying I'm either gonna mount it or I'm not in that scenario, right? So like I usually do it with Raptor Herder.
Yeah. Well, that's another
Like,
option.
okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna play a Raptor Herder, right? That's a card. My first 5 is 8 dice, and Raptor Herder is one of those 8. I throw it on the board, and I swing it at you at something, right? And they'll either, a lot of times I'll try and swing it at something where it's not gonna just get countered and die, because I want it to sit there exhausted, and then I want my opponent to pour more resources into killing it to try and prevent my Empyrean mount. And if they do that, I will very happily recur and replay another Raptor Herder with those 2 dice I was going to use for the mount to get another Raptor Hatchling and stuff on the board, and then just kind of pivot into a wide swing first round. I've done it. I've gone like another, like even further down that rabbit hole with resummon also, where I'll first 5 resummon as well, and then do the same thing again, right? Where it's like, okay, I'll give you that option, right, where you can kill my Raptor Herder and I won't mount, or I might not even use resummon, and I'll do another recur replay of an ally with those 2 dice. And like I think I had a first 5 one time. It was like 6 dice I started, but knowing that I can spend, if I get the mount, that's 2, and then I can spend 2 to resummon the mount as well and get an ally back. But there's so many cool things with Demona that you can do. And I think that's a point in general that I want to make with first 5ing with anybody, is that more people should build decks around really cool first 5 combos. Like specifically related to, like, here's a sweet combo that's going to overwhelm your opponent, that I can put 3 cards together in the first 5 and do this. Like, we don't, as Ashes players, do enough of that. And the Asterixes of the world do it, and that's why you see them come out with these crazy first 5s that blow people out of the water, because that's what they're doing. Like, their deck building process is starting there.
Yeah, I've seen Asterix do that a lot, and it's hard to guess too.
Yeah. Like, he's been doing a lot of blood archering lately. I've played him a few times, and
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. I've seen 3 games, and he's played it every time.
yeah, and it's awesome into the meta right now, because I feel like the meta is kind of very focused around these like 1 life efficient guys. And you put one of those down, he just like blood archer, I kill it, your move. You got another one to put down because I'm gonna kill that one too, right? And then if you throw down something to attack it, he puts down like a Crypt Guardian to unit guard it. So he's got like this shell around the blood archer to kill your little efficient guys, and like that thing is only in there to first 5 and kill your efficient little dudes. I just think more people need to build decks around like a really sweet first 5 combo, like the whole Essence Druid, play a ready spell, summon a guy, meditate it away, Essence Druid the spell back, and play it again.
That's a good time. I enjoy doing that.
Yeah, once upon a time, that was like one of those big combos that I think that Brian was the first guy to do it.
Brian B,
that
for sure.
Thought of that and did it, and like that's just a really sweet combo that the opponent's not expecting, and it gets a lot of value out of those dice. I think the resummon Raptor Herder thing in Demona is kind of another one of those where you can, do some really cool stuff and either have a million Raptor Herders, or and two Empyrean mounts in the same round.
Well, like Xander was the original, Bill sort of was. That was the original version of that, right? Before Demona even came out, is there's always more raptors in the banana stand.
Yeah.
And he would what is it, reincarnate or whatever the ability is, but play raptor herder. If it gets killed or otherwise, who cares? Otherwise, usually I think there was a Ceresaurus or something in there
Yeah.
to make more use of it. But you just keep pulling them out, and it's it takes a lot of removal or ping otherwise. But
I played a James deck once that the whole point was the first 5/4 raptor herders.
yeah, I've done that too.
And like and it's like that's a you James can do stuff like that with cards like Spectral Assassin and Rally the Troops or whatever else, and just his ability. And like it's like think outside the box and come up with cool stuff like that where you can overwhelm another player in the first 5 if they're just going to come out with 4 books and a flex card like a normal type thing. I think you can really jump on a player, and if you win round 1 convincingly in Ashes, like I said before, it's very difficult to come back from. So I guess I'm here to promote creativity in first 5s and not being afraid. I mean, it's great to have a plan for your deck and a player plan. That's always going to be a good way to play Ashes, especially when you're first starting out. But as you get more into building speculative decks, like, do not be afraid to go ham on the first 5 with some crazy combo.
Well, that is convenient because that leads us into our Jank Tank challenge, where we got a lot of submissions this week, and they're all different. We got 7? I guess. Well, if you don't include ourselves, we got 4. So I called out Red King and Charlotte last week, or last episode, and we got both of theirs. We've got Waves and Shadowfire, who also submitted, and then our 3. And what's cool is that they're just all different. There's 7 different Phoenixborns, which is cool in and of itself. Then the ideas are different, and this was all around the Empower canon. So like Empower had to obviously be there. So I'm glad we talked about like the idea of tempo and utility spells, because this is the example of like looking at these decks and trying to figure out, okay, how are you first 5ing? So we're not going to cover all of them, but we did pick out. Well, we'll talk at least about Red King and Charlotte's, because if I'm going to call them out, we got to cover. So what do you guys want to talk about first? Do you want to cover Charlotte's or do you want to cover Red King's?
I mean, I pulled Red King up on the screen, or on my screen anyway. So
Okay.
maybe we talk about him first.
Orchestra. Let's do it.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so Shmeni, lead us off here.
Yeah, so this is a classic Red King deck in that it's got 12 ready spells. And
so way off of everything we just talked about.
yeah, I mean, it's in his deck description, he doesn't provide a first 5 guidance. So he says it's variable for the matchup, but something like Abundance, Stallion, Law of Fear, Gates, and Power, which in and of itself is a fascinating first 5. There's, it can obviously play 2 units. It could potentially play 3 if you get a Stallion removed and you Fiona for an additional Stallion. But it could also draw into some things. So it's got 7 allies, 3 Huntmasters, 3 Scalds, which can't be played round 1, and a Raptor Herder. It's got a Butterfly Monk. So it's really interesting to try and understand what the first 5 plan might be, and I think it's some combination of building Stallions. I think you probably want 2, and threatening Empower to build them up further, and if you get a second Empower playing it, or if you get a Resonance and they're 3x Resonance, using that for removal. So I don't really know how this is going to go. It's the kind of thing where I feel like you really need to experience it to understand what it can do. But it's really intriguing to me to try and figure out the lines. And I'll say that Law of Fear is doing, I think, a ton of work in this first 5 to allow Fiona to do a bit of what Killer Cactus was describing in the horse cheese of really focus on building up a stallion and not having to sweat the small stuff, so to speak, of opponents, sallies and 1x wishing wings and whatever.
It's wild to look at this deck. I mean, like, just the idea. I mean, to sit down and play a match, you really have to have an understanding of the game and possible outcomes of your matchup, because there's so much flexibility in what you start, whether you start Law of Fear at all, whether whether you're able to get your Squall Stallions out nowadays with the variety of three damage removals. And then he adds like, oh well, you could play Gates, but you can also play Fiona's thing, so you can get a lot of units out, but whether you can actually get them powered up and do anything is interesting. And then he does have the root armor and the butterfly monk to sort of act as protection on top of the Law of Fear. But other than that, I mean, there's not the typical, like, there's not Fate Reflection, there's not Golden Veil. It's interesting.
I think I have quite a bit to say about this, but we'll see where my thought process goes. First of all, with the if you're gonna make Empower work, we were talking about this before the podcast, but I think if you're gonna make it work, you need to focus it really fast. Right? If you don't get it online quickly, then it's just a waste of a die and a space on your spellboard spot. So I think you've really got to get it going fast, and I like that he's got the Abundance to draw cards, he's got the Squall Stallion book to draw cards, he's got 3 times Empower and 3 times Resonance to give him. I mean, that's maximum drawing of cards and ways to focus Empower quickly. Not to mention Gates Thrown Open refreshes all that stuff I just said to redraw. So I like that as a way of, like, if we're going to use Empower, let's get it online quick. Also, I'm a big fan of, if I'm going to use 3x Resonance to focus a ready spell, I don't need all those resonances, right? Like, they're just empty deck space, except that he has River Scald, and now you can throw the resonance at another unit with River Scald. And I've done that in some of my other decks. It's really great, as a matter of fact. Like, I don't know, I've played River Scald a lot, where, like, you go to play a River Scald and you look at the cards in your hand and you're like, man, I want all of these. Like, I don't want to
Yeah,
I don't want to discard this Sonic Swordsman to kill a 3-die unit. But when you have this extra resonance just chilling here that you don't need anymore, it's so easy to just throw it at something with a River Scald. So, like, the 3x River Scald, and they draw a card too, by the way, that both helps you focus Empower and beef up your Squall Stallion. It fits together so nicely that I really like that. The other things are, the 3 times Gates Thrown Open is something you don't see a whole lot, but makes a lot of sense here because you want to draw a lot of cards to both focus your Empower and beef up your Squall Stallion. So, gatesing Abundance to draw a bunch of cards for free, works really well. And because he doesn't have the Golden Veils and the Fate Reflections to protect the horses, you can refresh that book and make more horses. Or more Butterfly Monks, which with Fiona 15 life really needs. But I feel like Butterfly Monk is like a Fiona unique card, like staple card. If you're building Fiona, you might as well just put Butterfly Monk in. Otherwise, you're just gonna lose the game because she doesn't have enough life.
Yeah, I mean, the 3 gates open is interesting too, because, I mean, is there a case where you'd ever, I forget, I'm looking at it now, but, like, would you ever use gates to empower cannon a couple times?
Potentially, or Fiona's ability.
Yeah.
And that was another thing I wanted to say. Like, I'm a big fan of using Fiona's ability on non-book ready spells. Just especially the free ones, like Abundance is a really cool use of it here. But even Empower, like, side action Fiona, main action blow something up with Empower when they're not expecting it. If you're one, if your powers are all exhausted is pretty cool. I mean, obviously it's great for getting out another butterfly or another squall stallion, but I do really like it on the non-book spells.
Yeah. I also like that he included Vanish as his like only reaction spells because my guess, the mindset would be if you're going in on Squall Stallion, um, then and I think you mentioned this with your horse cheese, the one of the possible downsides is facing Guilt Link. So the Vanish would work there, and then also it just helps with Fiona's low life, against the molten golds or sympathy pains that you're likely to like any of the burn that you're gonna face.
Yeah, agreed. And like Schmendrix says, Law of Fear I think is doing a lot of work, not only in the first 5 of this deck, but future rounds too. I mean, if your Squall Stallion has 7 attack because you're torrenting the crap out of it, like I'll play Law of Fear all day. I don't care. It goes from 7 to 6, right? So what? It reduces every. If I'm only gonna swing with one guy, and like that seems to be kind of the win con of this deck is blow everything up, and eventually a big horse is gonna hit you in the face. Then Law of Fear is excellent at not really mattering to the Squall Stallion, also slowing the game down so that and the damage coming at Fiona so that her low life can actually last a long time. So I mean, that's why I can't talk. I had a lot to say about it, but and this is common when a Red King makes decks. He's really good at just finding a bunch of cards that just mesh very, very, very well together. And he cuts out like the riffraff of the other stuff that like I'm just putting in every deck that might not be needed, like Ice Trap and stuff. Like it'd be hard for me to build a deck with 3 nature dice and not have Ice Trap in it.
Yeah.
But he's saying like, well, if I'm gonna have 3 times Empower and 3 times River Scald, like I don't need the Ice Trap stuff. I'll just blow it up with those, and it can work that way, right? And obviously it takes some time playing the deck to figure out how that stuff is supposed to flow. But never having played this deck, I don't know if it works. But just looking at it, like that's the kind of stuff I see when I look at this list of cards, and it just feels like it would be really cool to mesh together.
I think the trick, like I said, is really just making sure that you first 5 correctly and not getting blown out with Fiona's low life, especially to like a burn matchup, because in that case, Law of Fear does diddly for you. It's cool.
Yeah, the other thing with the double Squall Stallion, and this was a point Schmendrix has been making all week, is that like you can, empower to put a token on one Squall Stallion and then remove tokens from the other one to actually kill the thing. And it's cool to have 2 Squall Stallions out, right? Torrent one time puts a token on both of them. So you're building up 2 at the same time. So that kind of, opportunity, as long as you have 2 horses on the board, always exists, right? Where you can token one and remove tokens from the other one to blow something up. So I kind of like that thought process too. And I think that's what he's going for with both with Fiona's ability and the 3 times gates thrown open.
My mind just jumps to whether he considered any of the new cards to add on to that, like Wave Crash is the primary one I was thinking of, or whether he's like, no, Empower's enough that's enough removal plus Scald, I guess. But it's just it's cool how he just boils it down to an essence. So let's move on to Charlotte's, which was.
Would you say he's an essence druid?
I guess I would.
Potential.
Yeah.
Charlotte put in a nominee deck, which is interesting. So she added in her description that what she did was she slapped together a collection of status token heavy units. And this is running only 2 in power, Tile Crab, Hopper, and Wing, 3 of the wings. And then she's got she's got a Gorn Rock Brawler in here. She's got Huntmaster, Herder, String Mage. So I think the idea here was that with Nominee having the Encore as well as 2 Recollects, you're less worried about meditating the empowers away. But I think one point you made earlier, Shmeny, before we started recording, was just that you could get that empower stuck on the bottom of your deck, and then you're in a bit of a trap. But I don't think that's too much of a concern here, just because the rest of the deck is really just a solid deck.
Yeah, no, it backs up its jank plan with a lot of really strong units. Like any deck that can put out multiple Huntmasters, Raptor Herders, that's built on a Tidal Crab Wishing Wing engine, that has Encores to bring back your favorite things, that can do the blammo move of Explosive Growth Wishing Wing. Like these are solid things that do a lot of work. I think Goron Rock Brawler is just a very cool. I think it's hard to make it stick when you don't have Golden Veil, but I also put a Goron Rock in my deck submission for Empower because it does get status tokens, and it's kind of a fun way of threatening either to get a status token on it to potentially refresh it, or you can just status it up to blow something up. So
Yeah, you could crab it, or you could string mage it. I think what you said is backing up the jank by just a solid plan is something that I try and do as like a core. Like when I think of jank, sometimes it's fun to just go sort of all in, like just the entire deck, or at least a good portion of the cards are combo pieces, and you're really just focusing on sort of a grander jank plan, like hopefully the upcoming Jank Fest, which, side note, was slightly announced in one of the Discord channels by Impossible German, but we'll get to that in maybe a few weeks. Is just building a deck where it's like my jank is maybe 2 or 3 cards that are sort of the core concept, but that they're backed up by the rest of the deck being solid.
Again, I think if you want to make Empower work, you have to try and focus it quickly. I do like that we're kind of going the crab wishing wing route here, which is fine. And you're going to draw cards to focus it quickly. Also Nominee's ability draws a card. And like you said earlier, Treatment, with the Recollects, we can kind of aggressively, in the Encores, we can aggressively meditate. And we're not worried about spinning off these extra Wishing Wing books or Empower books. And we can do a little bit of digging that way to focus stuff, which is pretty cool. I think we missed the most important thing of this deck, which is the name. She named it. It was an honor to be nominated. And whenever you put a pun like that in a deck name, and you've got my attention right away. So well done on the deck name, Charlotte. I appreciate that. But like you guys said,
that's an immediate seal of approval.
Yeah, no doubt about it. But yeah, just a solid deck. Otherwise, besides Empower, and we're using it here as some extra removal. We don't have a ton of removal in the deck otherwise. So we kind of do need to get it going if we're going to try and remove our opponent's units. And we're going to have to do that because we don't have any burn or mill. Like, there's no plan B.
Well, no, there's 2 sympathy pains there.
I guess there are 2 sympathy pains, so we have a little tiny bit of reach. And
yeah, she mentioned that maybe fitting a Molten in there, but it's a swing deck.
Yeah, even 1 times Molten Gold, like with Nominee, can be 4 times Molten Gold, right? So, I do kind of like to throw one of those into lists with her just because you can always encore it back. But Nominee, I think, is in an interesting spot in the metagame where the decks that are dominating Hope and Brennan are doing so a lot based on their ability. And Nominee is the Phoenixborn that shuts that off, and we haven't really seen people do that, right? Like, I really want to see someone come out here with a Nominee with choke in the first 5 and just, choke, main action, choke, side action, calming melody, and against Hope or Brennan, and just say, all right, your ability's gone for 2 rounds, like, deal with it. And see what happens. That's off topic from this, but Nominating makes me think about that stuff.
Yeah, if I was to edit this deck, because I like almost everything about it, I'd probably drop the like I drop one of the three explosive growth and one of the two time hopper books, and then slot in a molten gold and maybe even a generosity, just because I think like with the sixth battlefield, you're gonna get there's so many units in here. I think you're fine. Uh, Adding the extra burn option is always nice. And then my only thought for generosity is Nominee is good at shutting down a Phoenixborn ability for 1 round, but then she gets double exhausted. So being able to refresh that is helpful. And then you also, I mean, she's only got 17 life, so you're cool with if you get the heal. And because your plan is already to get, drawing all the pieces, you're cool if you get the draw 3. So as a one of, I think it could be a nice slot in. I haven't really thought about the first fives, but I think this is a good deck. I would play it.
One more thing I'll just say about Naminé and her ability. Unlike Choke, she is not limited to exhausting an unexhausted Phoenixborn. So I did think about a Naminé that had that first fives Choke and her ability, so that you basically keep the clock equal for both sides with and double exhaust each side. And I think that's pretty cool. And I agree. I think we need to figure out how to make her work in the current meta, because she's got some strengths.
Yeah, a lot of these games are only going to 2 rounds anyway. So like, if you just choke Calming Melody, then they don't have their ability for those 2 rounds, and that a lot of times like what some decks I feel like need to beat Brennan and Hope are like just another round, and I wonder if choke plus Calming Melody just gets you there by turning off their super powerful abilities. Now, I mean, that's the best way to do it, but I think, obviously this deck from Charlotte's not in Ceremonial, and Generosity, to Treatment's point, is an interesting way to kind of do the same thing in time, which she is in. And, Calming Melody and then Generosity to unexhaust it so that you can just do it again next round and shut the ability off again. So kind of accomplishing the same thing with a different card and a different color, and that's pretty cool. So I support that ad.
That's the deck now for tomorrow that you're gonna be building. You're gonna be building a ceremonial Nominee burn deck that can shut down the anti Hopes and the anti
Yeah, it has
Brennans.
choke and generosity.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna triple exhaust Hope on the first round.
That's what's on my mind for sure. I think it's effective, and like we said, with Encore, you do have a strong burn option. So I do wonder, pack in some heal as well, and then a bunch of cheap units to just put up that wall a little bit. We don't have we've gone for a wild amount of time, so we don't have to cover all the other decks, but we might as well do the just quick overview. So mine was really just a pretty low effort throw together last week, but it was based off of something that I've been thinking more about, which is really just starting deck ideas with 3-ofs, and then doing the tailoring of the cards and adding in sort of the tech pieces later. And it's something hopefully on a subsequent episode we'll start covering in how to refine your deck. So I threw in 3-ofs of basically everything. I have the Empowers, the Mirror Spirits, the Hoppers, a ton of allies. This is all in Koji, by the way, so you get tons of tokens. And wave crashes, flash strikes, standstills to sort of keep that whole engine punching through. And it's probably not great as if the goal was Empower deck, it's not going to be great at focusing the Empower because there's not card draw. But it's probably just a good generic token deck. So who knows? Then you got Killer, your Ramia deck, if you want to give that a quick once-over for the crowd.
I mean, we don't even have to.
We can skip my Jericho too.
Yeah, it was just a basic. All right, here's a couple units that have status tokens on them. Empower takes them off. Do it in Rimia because she has room to make put utility spells on the board without sacrificing too much tempo. That was all I was trying to do.
I think the two main things that stand out to me just quickly looking at it is the Canyon Shelter synergy, because you have Canyon Shelter and Fighting Spirit in there. So the ability to stash a unit and then bring it back out with a token, or if it dies, stacking up the Fighting Spirits is cool. And then you have Leviathan in there as part of that wall that we sort of talked about earlier. Killer, you did a Jericho deck. Or sorry, Schmendrix, you did a Jericho deck.
3x Huntmaster. The only way to focus Empower is Resonance in round 1, and the way that Jericho gets around that is basically either Swift Messenger prepares second Huntmaster, so you can play double, or some TBD Blink shenanigans. I haven't really thought through other first 5. So, and then the rest of its books are Mirror Spirit and Time Hopper. And yeah, I think that this was really inspired by the fact that, again, you don't have to take the tokens off of the unit that you're building up. So, and she's got, with Huntmasters and Mirror Spirits, Blink is a sneaky both refresh and status token rebuilder. So if you do empower those off and you want them back for some reason, you've got a way to get them back quickly.
I also think Blink is just super cool with Mirror Spirit and Huntmaster. And I mean, in general, like just blinking a Mirror Spirit at the end of a round is a feels good moment. So it's interesting though that you went with like the lower in power count and just went strictly for the I'm going to focus it right away and then use the second part of the ability.
Yeah, it's pretty bad round 1. I'm not gonna lie. A 2 cost 2 damage, or if lucky 3 damage removal spell. Not great.
No, but you do have the ability to get like what, double Huntmaster, so
Yeah, you do.
that's pretty good. Then we've got Shadowfire's Aerodel Big Bazooka deck. His is the 3 in powers, Resonance, Gilder, Sally, and Tidal Crab. And then with like just every removal spell, basically, that's in Nature, Sympathy, and Time. Excavates, Molten Gold, Wrath, Wave Crash, Crescendo, Ice Trap, Sympathy, Pain. He played this ages ago, like sort of when, I think, what was it, Tristan first was released, and it's 4 taxes. So in terms of tempo hit, it's huge. But he makes it work. It's just because there's so much removal with Aerodel that it is very hard to make anything stick, whether it's small things or big things. So it is interesting. I'd like to know or see him play it more against a variety of matches and see how it holds out. But yeah, once the engine, if you can survive round 1, then there's a lot there. So it's pretty cool, the Big Bazooka. And then finally, we've got Waves, who made a Herald deck, Torrent of Empowered Souls. And his was also a Squall Stallion, but he went Empower Squall Stallion and Time Hopper, so really building that engine. And then he said that the goal is actually to not play Empower, but you do first 5 it, and you're really just trying to build up your status token engine, and get the Stallion as sort of the primary target. And then later on, you can do things like mark a target and Empower, which gets you extra removal value to one-shot high life units, or mark and Flash Strike. There's a lot of different things. So this one was kind of interesting too, and he added, again, a Leviathan to sort of protect that Squall Stallion, as well as Tidal Shift, and then he's got some removal in there. Notable, he's got 3 Ocean's Gift, which is kind of cool. So those were the decks. They were in our Discord thread. Do you guys have, because there's 7, do you want to pick 2 that are the seal of approval for this week?
For me, it was Red Kings. For me, was I like that one the best. If I had to pick a second, I would probably go with Schmenny's Jericho.
Shmeny, what did you pick? What are your 2 picks?
I'm actually gonna go with I like Red Kings. I mean, I have no idea how it'll work, so I'm intrigued by that alone. But I'll pick Shadowfires as my second. I mean, I remember seeing that deck a while ago, and I think it's already in a really strong removal package. And when we talk about net units, I think that Aerodel with Empower focused has the ability to handle the taxes it has to pay in round 1, and I think that's pretty cool.
Okay. I'm actually gonna pick Charlotte's because I think that in terms of like just good stuff backed up by an Empower plan, it's solid, and there, like I said, there's very little that I would change, but I just think it's a good deck overall, and I also think it's probably pretty easy to play, which is my only problem with Red Kings is I just don't think I have the skill level to really pilot this crazy deck, especially with Fiona and 15 life. It might be in a bit of a pinch in the current meta. And my second deck, I'm gonna actually toss over to you, Shmeny. I think your Jericho is pretty cool. Like I said, I love seeing Jericho and experimenting with her more, and Blink and Mirror Spirit and Huntmaster and Goran Rock even. Like there's a lot of cool stuff in here. And I would want to play this deck. So those are my 2.
Thank you.
All right, so that wraps up the submissions and our seals of approval. Let's see what we're spinning this week. So, Killer, do you have the Wheel of Jank?
I have the Wheel of Jank. I have given it a spin. And the Wheel of Jank has landed on Blood Transfer.
Ugh.
The one we've all been waiting for.
Okay.
At least it's off the board now, but we can figure out something fun to do with Blood Transfer. These aren't going to be good decks, but because Blood Transfer is not a good card, but hopefully somebody out there will come up with a really cool idea for it. I've got a couple things.
I had one. I wish I remembered it, but I had an idea the other night, and I was like, am I crazy? Is this going to... I think Drain Vitality has more play than Blood Transfer, but who knows? Well, I'm interested to see. Is there anybody you guys want to shout out to, or...
I'm not gonna make anybody build with Blood Transfer.
Yeah, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Although, who? Well, yeah. I mean, I think Blood Transfer Dreadwraith could be interesting. So maybe I'll start there. I don't know who to start with though to bring me along on that journey.
You know what? I will. I will. Clue should make a deck. Clue. I don't think we've got one. Clue yet. He makes a lot of good stuff. So Clue, build us a Blood Transfer deck.
I'm gonna do a real long shot here because I don't even know if he listens to us. But I'm gonna call out Neil because I just think he would hate this card so much, and I want to see.
Look, it's not Amplify, so it could have been worse.
It's not Beast Tamer, right?
Right.
You know, it still does have charm though, so I want to see what he does with it. Okay, so cool. So that's the challenge then. Yeah, hopefully we can cover some more deck building stuff in the next episode as well. Probably around sort of support cards, meta counters, silver bullets, that type of thing.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Oh, and we got to sign off with our tagline from our famous intern, right?
Yeah, he's asleep right now, but he's with us in spirit.
That's true. And if you're not janky, you're stanky.
That's right.
Gets better every time.
Been another fun episode, guys.
All right, take care.
Thanks, guys.
We'll see ya.